This week on the Rental Report Review. Model Shop. Claire's Knee. Love in the Afternoon. Tangerine. Proxy War. Starting out with quite a curious film this week.
Hi.
Hi.
I think similar to when Hitchcock said he's not interested in making slices of life, that he makes slices of cake. I think movies are at their best, at their most captivating, when they operate with this sort of dream logic. This is about 1 year after Gary Lockwood co-stars in 2001, and in many ways, this film is an awful lot like Eyes Wide Shut, in that Lockwood's character has been really sleepwalking through his life, is animated by trying to unravel why any of us keep going. I give Model Shop 3.75 stars. It's a lyrical film about love, life, Los Angeles, and I'm not quite sure if the somewhat old Hollywood performances, or in some cases non-professional actor performances, hurt or help. I don't know. This is a film I think I'm going to have to sit with a couple more times. There's also always something extra dreamy about a non-American shooting Los Angeles for Los Angeles that makes it extra dreamy. The second shot of this movie is one of the most beautiful images I've ever seen committed to film. It's amazing how quickly one can tell they're in the hands of a master, in this case, a team of masters. Just to dwell on this shot for a moment. Not only is this shot a technical marvel, it's a day exterior shot, it's moving on a boat, there's the whole range of exposure, the color and saturation is just this side of a naturalistic dreaminess. But one of the most amazing things about this shot, having seen a few Eric Rohmer films, it's just oozing and dripping with narrative metaphor. There's a woman standing on a bridge over water. What is a bridge but a connection between two places, this transitory space? Within the Six Moral Tales, the male characters are often caught between places, between women. But, as with this image, they're completely separated, traveling but going nowhere. And is in dialogue with the classical conception of one-point perspective, being the convergence of order as ordered by God over the natural world for us to discover. And these two characters in this film and in other Rohmer films are the struggle between the sub and unconscious and the higher intellect, in this case represented by the woman on the bridge and the man in the boat in the sea of chaos. It perfectly sets the table for the film about to unfold on every level. I mean, look at those swans. It's so good. It's so good. Anyway, I just had to stop and dwell for a second. If I had to rate and review this film in the context of the Six Moral Tales, which is an authority I've granted myself, I think...
Dans toute femme, il y a un point plus vulnérable. Pour les unes, c'est la naissance du cou, la taille, les mains. Pour Claire, dans cette position, dans cet éclairage, c'était le genou.
I think I would place Claire's Knee as my third favorite in the series, just behind My Night at Maud's, followed by La Collectionneuse, and then this film. But in no way does that make this a third-class movie. Rohmer and Almendros are operating at such a high level. It's almost impossible to communicate, really. There's often a lot of hullabaloo made about filmmakers, auteurs, making the same film over and over again. And I think Rohmer's self-induced challenge to essentially do that consciously with 6 films gives total merit and legitimacy to that accusation not being detrimental, but actually a useful tool. And now that I think about it, it actually reminds me of The Five Obstructions, where Lars von Trier puts Leth through a series of cinematic challenges. Anyway, that's another film for another time. I do highly recommend that, especially if you're a filmmaker. But the sort of central theme or question at the center of Claire's Knee here, I was going to say grappling with, but it's not really grappling with. It's almost more strolling through the countryside, through the mountains of sexual relationship, transitions, boundaries. But at the center of that is this sort of lingering question about how and where does love arise? Is our logic and rationality, almost like the popular debate around science and religion, is our rationalistic, logic-seeking intellect inherently at odds with our emotional, intuitive drives? I think he makes a very good case that it's sloppy at best. I give Claire's Knee 4.5 stars. And even in that, I feel like I'm already underrating it. Everything is great in this film. The cinematography, the sound, the music, the editing, the acting. It's masters operating at their absolute peak. I don't know if I prefer the title Love in the Afternoon or Chloe in the Afternoon more.
Tu sais, c'est très difficile de me libérer tôt. Nous avons une clientèle de gens qui déjeunent à des heures invraisemblables. Et toi, tu pourrais pas t'arranger pour être un peu libre en fin d'après-midi?
There's something about Chloe in the Afternoon that possibly... No, I thought myself out of it, because there's also a lot of scenes with his wife later. Anyway, Love in the Afternoon, the sixth and final installment of Eric Rohmer's Six Moral Tales. This movie was painful to watch. As I think I alluded to earlier in my night at Mods, that hit a lot closer to home than I was hoping or anticipating. I think I at least knew a little bit better ahead of time what I was possibly getting myself into. That being said, once again, I am more than able to identify with a couple characters in this film. At least, Rohmer is very loving and tender in how he puts his characters through hell. He and Nestor Almendros set them up in beautiful locations with beautiful lighting. Everybody looks beautiful, yet they do the absolute worst possible things they can to each other in the worst possible way, completely destabilizing any sense of love, of trust, faith. I mean, these films are ultimately, yes, they're about love and what is love and how do we find love, yada, yada, yada. But I'm sure I'm not the first person to totally bullshit my way through this. There's a kind of central argument around the faith of participating in existence. We make a certain leap in existence to interact, and our conscious mind, our intellect, is constantly questioning that leap and also justifying the leaps that we make for reasons we can't ultimately reconcile. I don't know, something like that. I give Love in the Afternoon 4 stars. I think one of the more beautiful final statements that Rohmer arrives at in this film, not really spoil the film, but he or his character realizes the sort of importance and sanctity of play, that you have to sort of accept the absurdity, and in order to move forward in any sort of meaningful way, you have to embrace it with play, not with skepticism, certainly not deceit. I'm sure I'm underrating this film, and in some way, I guess I'm comparing it against the other Six Moral Tales, which is unfair. I think I need to rewatch this film on its own sometime in the future and really re-experience it as a singular object. Hopefully, maybe even in the theater. I like that he returns to the city for this final installment, but I guess maybe I was hoping for a new layer of either experimentation or something. Not that he has to, not that anybody has to keep changing for the sake of change, but there is an amazing departure in the middle of this film that sort of hints or suggests that maybe more could have been done, but maybe it's best that that segment stands in stark opposition to everything else. Like I said, I'm going to have to look at this again.
Tu es folle. Non. Ce qui est fou, c'est de prétendre aimer quelqu'un avec qui on vit. Moi, je ne pourrais pas aimer un type qui serait installé dans mon lit, s'imaginerait avoir le droit d'y rester. Surtout s'il était le père de mon enfant. Tu sais que j'ai envie d'avoir un enfant?
Oui, tu l'as déjà dit.
Eh bien, sache que j'ai trouvé le père. Oui, toi.
I've been meaning to get into Sean Baker's work for a little bit now.
Hey, Alexandra, come here. Listen, have you seen
Cinderella. Looks like someone has a crush.
I remember clocking Tangerine. How could you not when it came out? It had quite the nexus, was bold and unflinching, and very empathetic. It was shot entirely on iPhone. And it was a kind of DIY, low-budget film that shot a bit of TRT back into the American independent scene.
You didn't know?
White. Who is she?
All that being said, I think Tangerine ultimately delivers an experience that is definitely electric in many regards, but is tame and obvious in others. I think it has a very simple narrative structure. It is cast impeccably, from the real-life non-actors to the sprinkling of comedians throughout. I laughed out loud when I saw Ian Edwards and Chelsea Lynn, but I think it ends up having a little bit of a case of unfocused style over substance.
You didn't have to Chris Brown the bitch. What did you do to her?
I give Tangerine 3.25 stars. It's a really cool movie with a new cast of characters and archetypes, but I feel like the story didn't fully braid together in any surprising kind of way. I think it flirted with some interesting resolutions, but some of them it just completely abandons. It's also kind of funny and perverse that most of this film, shot on an iPhone, was shot right around Kodak. I mean, the building's right there if you know where that corner is. I guess in many ways, this film is really clarion call, is that right? Of the true digital revolution. I do think this film makes a case for what you shoot on being less important and making more of a case of why you should shoot on something. It was fun.
This motherfucking girl thing.
What is in a title? One of the things I was struck by in the Stanley Kubrick archives was his insistence on a good title and how hard and how much work you have to put into a good title. Proxy War, within that rubric, is a very interesting title. I think there's a meme that goes around that Americans are often laughed at for their elected officials, but I think maybe even more so it's for our self-inflicted ignorance around what our military-industrial complex does abroad and at home, while we are totally clueless. Proxy War uses that as a table setting for a film that unfolds. If the previous film, as I was saying, is sort of like the Goodfellas of the 5-part series of the Yakuza papers, in terms of its story structure, following a young man as he's coming up through the Yakuza and his rise and fall, this film, Proxy War, is sort of a Godfather archetypical story, or I guess what would be King Lear, right? An aging patriarch is reaching the end of his line, and his successors are plotting and jockeying for position to take over. While he's been an amazing presence and force in all the previous films, Bunta Sugawara has come into full possession of the full spectrum of his acting tool, as it were. He is an incredible force in this film and finally sets him up as a possible Michael Corleone of this narrative. I love this film. It's sticking to its lane with its aesthetic freneticism, but it's much more measured and coherent, and takes a moment for some amazing flourishes. The final sequence, you'll know it when you get to it, bears the full weight and responsibility of the consequences of thinking you're smart enough to operate a proxy war and outrun your fate. Because as we definitely all know by 2024, proxy war only really works when you can fool most of the people about who is actually operating what. I give Battles Without Honor and Humanity Proxy War 4 stars, and I do think I am possibly underrating it. That being said, I think this feels feels a little bit like a transition episode. It's incredible to see Akira Kobayashi strolling in. You definitely know things are going to be interesting to come because he wouldn't just stroll into a film and then disappear. That final scene, though, I'm gonna think about that one for a while. Thank you so much for watching. You can follow me on Instagram and X to see what movies I'm renting next, and pretty much everything is on my letterbox. I am going to go watch some more movies. I hope you do too. Pretty well.